Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Well, actually, just ladies. Today, we are going to be talking about evidence of evolution. You all asked for some animations, so I decided to go ahead and throw in some animations just to change things up a bit. Hopefully, next chapter, I'm going to be looking at a different program to do these slideshows in just to try to get you all more involved at home instead of just watching these and doing notes. So today, when we look at the evidence of evolution, your objectives, you will analyze the importance of the fossil record, figure out why it is so important and crucial to evolution, and you're also going to explore how things like homologous structures can teach us about the past. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is biogeography. Okay, so biogeography is the study of where organisms live now compared to their ancestors. And essentially, what this study is scientists look at where living organisms live today and then look at where they find fossil species that are similar to those that are living to tell us possibly how modern organisms evolved from their ancestors. And, we can also see travel, where some species may have traveled over time, where they once may have lived, all of that cool stuff. So one idea that we're going to talk about are species that are closely related but different. So what Darwin realized as he's going to the Galapagos is that species on the island were similar to the ones on the mainland. And he proposed that over time, natural selection produced different variations among these populations. And after all the years that have passed, many, many years, these variations are going to create very closely related but different species. And this is kind of what he saw with the tortoises happen. They all have different shells over a long period of time. They become very closely related species, but still different species. So another idea that we're going to look at is distantly related but similar. So this is going to be like the rhea, the ostrich, and the emu that we talked about earlier. The rhea being from South America, the ostrich being from Africa, and the emu being from Australia. And Darwin looked at these birds and looked at their fossils, their bones, and he noticed that the differences in their body show that they did evolve from a different ancestor. However, looking at some of the similarities, they do show that they evolved from a similar ancestor further back that adapted to that given environment. So essentially what Darwin said with the rhea, the ostrich, and the emu is their relatively early ancestors are going to be more related than the ones that came later on. So we're actually seeing different branches of evolution happen here. So one thing we need to talk about with evolution is the age of the Earth, because many people's large argument against evolution is that the Earth has not been around that long. There's no way that evolution could have happened in a couple thousand years. Well, the latest radioactive dating shows us that the world is 4.5 billion years old. That's with the B, billion. Really, really old. So what this pretty much means is that there is plenty of time for these ideas of natural selection to occur and for evolution to happen. The next piece of evidence we're going to be looking at, other than the Earth is really old, is the fossils that have been found. So when we talk about fossils, a lot of the recent discoveries that we have of fossils, we're able to trace them back to some modern species that exist or to an extinct ancestor of some kind. We find a lot of subspecies of humans that may have been a closely related species to us, but have died out through competition of some kind. And some of these fossils really helped Darwin's whole theory of evolution to be proven. Paleontologists, which are the scientists who go out, they dig, and they examine bones, have found that there are many different fossils linking all animals to some prehistoric ancestor. If you know of an animal, chances are there is some type of fossil evidence that links them to a distant relative. And the fossils discovered are irrefutable evidence for evolution. Words are hard right now, sorry. So one thing we're going to look at definitely in class is the fossil record, and we're definitely going to have to look at humans. But just to kind of give you a preview of what we're going to be looking at, here are some skulls of some of your distant relatives. The very far right bottom is a current human skull, and as you go to the left, you get older and older and older. And you can see by these skulls, it's small differences over a long period of time that eventually lead up to us as humans. So, looking at these head fossils, this provides excellent evidence for the support of evolution. Anatomy of many modern species is also a very large part of proving this idea of evolution. So the first thing we're going to talk about are homologous structures, and these are structures that are shared by related species. So essentially they are structures that if you look in one animal and then compare it to another animal or another animal, they're going to have certain structures in their bodies that are built up essentially the same way. And evolution explains why there are similar structures in many of the animals alive today. And the answer is they all evolved from primitive forms, meaning we all came from something far, 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 long time ago. And essentially we all developed the same way. And homologous structures really help us determine how closely related some species are to one another. So if we look at this picture here of homologous limb bones, this is also in your book. You can see that it links, all four of these modern day species are linked by an ancient lobe fish from long ago that walked up on water, or walked up onto land. And we can see the frog, which is an amphibian, really doesn't have too many closely related ancestors compared to the alligator, the chicken, and the horse when it comes to these homologous limbs. The alligator and the chicken are actually the closest related. Notice how their two lines are touching off the same branch. That means they're closely related. And if you look how the colored bones are set up, yellow, purple, green, red, blue, and you look at how the bones are shaped in each one, they're actually very similar. Now the horse is actually more closely related to a chicken or an alligator than, let's say, the frog over in the amphibian. And what scientists do is actually use homologous limb bones and some other evidence to help determine how closely related certain things are. Another idea of anatomy is analogous structures. And if you know what that word analogous means, then you know that it is a word to compare. So analogous structures are actually body parts that share common function but not structure. So an example of this would be like the wing of a bird and the wing of a bee. They have the exact same function, flight, but they're definitely different structures. So this means when we look at a bird and a bee, yes, they both have wings, yes, they both fly, but they develop differently, and really they don't share a common ancestor in the recent past. If you go back far enough, yes, they probably do. but recent past, no. Vestigial structures are another great way to see into the past. And a vestigial structure is defined as a body part that has been inherited from an ancestor but has lost its function. So in humans, this one's a pretty easy one because I think we've kind of talked about your appendix before and how it does not work. It doesn't do anything. We would call our appendix a vestigial structure. There are many other animals that also have these, like hip bones in dolphins is one example. So this means that at some point in the dolphin's history, dolphin ancestors actually used to walk and have legs. Now, do I mean upright like humans? No, but probably down on all fours in some way. And vestigial structures don't disappear because if it doesn't affect the fitness, why get rid of it? Having our appendix doesn't do anything bad to us. Now, if it ruptures, yes, but in normal everyday life, our appendix doesn't do anything, so why get rid of it? Why start over and waste energy when you can just stop using it? So here we see a flightless cormorant at the top. He's got little wings that he doesn't use at all. And then at the very bottom, we see an Italian three-toed skink, and those little legs are absolutely useless. It's kind of like a snake, but it's got those little legs and they do absolutely nothing. So those are both examples of vestigial organs. You can also see thigh bones in whales. Whales' ancestors actually at one point did walk on land as well. And this, I think, is probably one of the coolest pieces of evidence. It's embryology. And if you don't know what embryology is, it's essentially the study of an organism's developing body during development, or the study of watching an embryo grow. So many embryos we see develop in really similar ways and include homologous tissues and organs. So essentially what I'm saying there is when you're developing, we share those developmental tissues and a lot of different structures as we're developing with many other organisms. And these similar development patterns show us similar ancestors as well. And that's actually what one of the more interesting things we're going to be talking about in class. And what I want to show you here are these 5 embryos. So the top is like a modern day image of the embryo. The bottom is kind of a drawing of the embryo. Now I want you to look at all 5 of these, and this is 5 to 6 weeks in. And I want you to tell me which one is human. One of these is, the other 5 are not. And I want you to kind of mull it over, but we are going to go over this in class and let you all try to work it out and debate and talk about it. But at this time, I'm going to annoy people right now, because if you've been diligently listening, I greatly appreciate it. We got a few more slides to do, and I'm trying to get there as quick as possible, but I know I'm rambling, and a lot of this stuff's really interesting. So what I want you to do at this time is there's going to be a quiz on Schoology that says video quiz. And all I want you to do is I want you to go into it right after you watch this, so make a note. And what I want you to write down is Kentucky, the word Kentucky, and then hit send. That is your secret word of the day. So make sure you do that after you watch this video, okay? Then we can also use genetics to look at evolution, improve it. And the work of Mendel and genetics really helped to show how different traits can be passed on and how mutations can occur. Genetics also shows that all living things share almost identical DNA and RNA, which are the building blocks and fundamentals of life. And genetics also helps provide very powerful evidence of this idea of. Another thing we can look at are homologous molecules. And these are molecules that are found in different organisms that are similar. And organisms are going to share similar or common proteins and genes for development, because we might all need to break down, for example, glucose in our body. So we're going to have common proteins and genes that are used to break down glucose. We can look at Hox genes. If you think back to the DNA RNA chapter when we talked about Hox genes, we share common Hox genes that control our body development. They're very similar in different species. And Darwin used all of this to conclude that all species evolved with descent, with modification from ancestors. Meaning, as you go on further and further down the evolution line, small changes make us the different species we are today. And we can use natural selection. So today, scientists use bacteria to prove the fact that natural selection is occurring, as bacteria adapts to different cultures over time. And Darwin used his finches of the Galapagos to prove natural selection was happening. And these different finches were going to differ depending on what environment it was in. And there's a nice couple that you'll read about in the book called the Grants, and they have proved this over the past 35 years by living down in the Galapagos and doing studies. So the Galapagos finches vary with beak size and claws, but mostly we can look at their beaks. So if you look at the 4 finches that I have up right here, each one of their beaks is specialized for different actions. The one at the top left is for kind of a wrench motion that breaks twigs more easily. They can get those berries off that tree fairly easily. The one on the top right has kind of like needle nose pliers kind of a beak, where it can poke into holes and get bugs out of trees and in the ground much easier. The one at the bottom left can dig down into leaves with its curve-shaped beak very easily and get bugs down deep in leaves. And the one on the bottom right has that thick, strong beak, so it can crush nut shells and get to the nut inside. So Peter and Rosemary Grant have been studying finches for 35 years, and they collected many, many different species, and they all confirmed Darwin's ideas. And they confirmed this idea of competition based on different environment changes and the idea of survival of the fittest during a changing environment. So pretty much what they're saying is if there is more variety of a species, there's more chance of a survival. So if we look at this nice, beautiful chart here, we can see the percentage of surviving here, and this is bird survival based on beak size. So they found that, if you have a 6 millimeter to 9 millimeter beak, then your survival is going to be much lower when some natural disaster occurs. So the best area for survival here, or with the highest percentages, would be between 10 and 12 millimeters for beak size. So we can look at this trend and kind of start to see it kind of curving down right around 12.5 millimeters. So we can kind of see just by looking at this graph that beak size does play a factor in survival with these finches. So evolution provides us with insight to how a lot of these creatures evolve. And scientists consider evolution a cornerstone in science, as it helps us to understand all life on Earth, like Neil deGrasse Tyson said in the Cosmos episode we watch. Biology does not make sense if we take out evolution. For biology to make sense, we need evolution to be a part of it. So I know this is a long video, so please write down any questions you have, and I'm going to stop it here. Have a lovely, lovely day.